What's up guys, Ben here, bringing you another video today. We're going to continue our Champs preview series. We're going to be talking now, we're getting into the realm. We covered one of the contenders yesterday for Los Angeles Thieves. We're going to cover two more teams that I think have a very good shot to make it to the grand final. And that is your number 4 seed Toronto Ultra and number 3 seed New York Subliners. Let's talk about these two teams. 3 wins combined across 2 teams this season. These guys have played well. Let's recap, talk about their strengths and weaknesses, and make some predictions for how they will fare at this tournament. All right, so as always, we start with the look at the standings. Both teams have been like pretty much in the mix for a champ spot all year. I don't think any one of these teams, either New York or Toronto, has really been in danger of not making champs this year. But let's start off with Toronto Ultra, your most recent major host. I think going back to last year with regards to Toronto, it started off well. It looked like, the Cold War team that had made it to the grand final and lost to Atlanta FaZe was going to start things off strong with a first place at Kickoff Classic. But from there, I don't think, they weren't bad all season. They were pretty solidly like top 6 outside their dead last placing at Major 2. Like they were pretty good. They never really like sniffed another grand final. And it was just a lot of tough clutch moments in game 5s. Really big struggles with respawn. And so there was a big rethink with the team going into this season. They let Bance and Cammy walk as both guys went off to the Minnesota Rocker. And they brought in Standy coming over from Rocker. There's a lot of Toronto Rocker roster changes, as you can see. And they called up Scrappy from Toronto Ultra Academy NA. And that was a squad they started off the season with. Now they've replaced Standy with Hixie prior to the Major 3 win. But things were kind of iffy in the beginning of the year. Like they were solid, but they'd get to Saturday and lose 6 straight maps. But they made that Hixie change. They won the event in Dallas or Arlington or whatever you want to call it. And since then, they've been okay. Top 6 placing, not that great when they went to Columbus, although they played really poor online prior to the event and didn't have the best of seeding. And then recently at Major 5, I just think the slaying wasn't there. They didn't play horrible, but I think for the home fans, I think top 4 is disappointing. Really expecting that team to make a grand final. So all that combined, they've been competitive all year, placing worst top 6, couple of top 4s, and a victory, and they will be your 4th seed for the event. I mean, man, you take a look at where this team lies in terms of game modes, and this looks like a champs contender right here. They're good at all 3 game modes. Don't have many weak like maps and modes. I guess maybe you could say like Hotel S&D has been a little tricky for them at times, but there's not really a lot to criticize. A CeeLo S&D, like, most stuff is pretty much within 500. They have a couple of killer maps. Mercado, Hardpoint, don't really want to scrub with them on that. They've been a really good Fortress S&D team most of the season. I mean, 18-4 in Hotel, 11-4 in a CeeLo control is crazy. I guess maybe Expo control, something that they need to kind of round out to shape going into this final event, but they've been pretty killer in control. And as long as they're able to move away from Expo, I mean, you got to play Hotel or CeeLo, and they're combined, 29 and 8 on those 2 maps is pretty good. And they matched up well with most teams this season. 2-2 against Boston, 1-1 against Vegas. They obviously have a little bit of an advantage on Optic. FaZe has been the real boogeyman this season. Weirdly enough, as good as this team has been a respawn, 3-10 in a hardpoint against FaZe is a little odd. 4-2 against New York. That's pretty good. We'll get to that in a second. One, it's important. 1-2 against Rocker. We'll scroll past all the teams that did make champs. 2-1 against Seattle. Good. 3-0 there against Florida. And then they've had Thieves' number all season, kind of continuing this cycle we see with some of these teams where some teams beat other teams, who beat other teams, who beat other teams, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, they've smoked Thieves all year. Only lost 5 maps in 5 series is kind of wild. I think the one thing I am a little concerned about with this team is sort of the last couple of events that they have played. There's always been like one game that's been a little bit iffy. Stage 4, the S&D was not good online or at LAN prior to that event. They cleaned it up for Major 5, but they really struggled with hardpoint. The split, although the control was basically flawless. So I want to see with this Toronto team, them kind of come into form in all 3 game modes. Considering that they're on the top side with a lot of really good hardpoint teams, they can't continue to struggle in this game mode. And we talked about it with FaZe, like they've had a number of matchups where the hard points haven't gone their way. I think the 0-3 in Fortress is kind of wild. This team was really good in Fortress, insane in Fortress prior to stage, and really struggled on that map. So that's probably one they need to clean up here ASAP. I think maybe my only other criticism of this team this year is the game 5s have been kind of ugly. This was more recent memory as well, because they were pretty good at game 5s, but Major 4 and Major 5, they've lost a number of game 5s online and offline. In fact, I think we can take a look, and they're on kind of a pretty decent loss record when it comes to game 5s. Let's scroll down here. They lost 1 in New York. They beat New York as well in game 5. So 1-1 there in the last 2. But they lost to Rocker. Where else here? Lost to FaZe, lost to Vegas, lost to Seattle, lost to Boston. So you see the last 6 or 7, they've only got like one of those game 5 wins in there. So want to see them get a little more ice at the end of the series, because recently in the last few months, it just has not been there. But I think either way, I like where Toronto's at. These are just little nitpicky things. I think this team is in a really good shape going this event, is going to be a key factor. So let's talk about some of the individual performances this season. Give some credit to some folks who might be getting some awards. I mean, look, I think when we start talking about Toronto individual performances this season, let's talk about the good and let's talk about the bad. So I think Kleenex is having a pretty solid season. It's been up and down at times, but has been really good in the response. 0.98 control, 1 in hard point. I mean, he's an absolute pace setter. 48 engagements per 10 in hard point, 37 in control. I mean, he's putting up a 1 while playing super quick. Okay, maybe the S&D hasn't been the best. He's been dying a lot in search. Maybe need to see more impact from him, but that's okay. I think that they can work on that. I just think those numbers have been pretty good for him as a sub. I don't think it puts him in the elite sub category, but it's good enough if they perform that I think they have a real chance to win. I think the player I really want to tip, though, individual performance-wise, stats, has been Scrappy. I mean, this guy is really up there with the best of the best this season. Above a 1.1 in pretty much every category, 1.2 in control. He's getting a lot of first bloods in search. He's active in hard point, second most interactions. Like for that second AR, like he is getting in the mix and playing with pace. And this guy is in the MVP conversation. He's definitely going to be an all-star this season. Definitely gonna be rookie of the year. Like, what a great season from Scrap. You know, he was obviously a big trash talker coming in this year. Didn't think he was gonna put up there, but I gotta give this guy the credit. I know he always talks beef on me. I know him and I have a little bit of a thing, but I gotta give this guy credit. He's having an amazing season and has been, I think, a lot of the reason why this Toronto team has kind of stepped it up from last year. I do think a player that needs to step up is Hixie. You know, this season he's been like a 0.9, 0.85 player. Want to see a little bit more from him. Now, if we take a look at the Major 5 stats, he didn't play amazing in Respawn in Major 5, but a bunch of them didn't as well. But if we scroll and we take a look at, say, an event they won, like Major 3, you see the sort of performance that he's giving them around that 0.95. I'm only asking him to get a couple of more kills. He doesn't need to drop a 1.1. You see when he can play well, they get production from other players, they're good to go. I think another kind of interesting slaying thing is sort of the difference between Scrap's performance online in Major 5 and then at the actual event. Like online, he was putting up maybe the best online splits we've ever seen from a player. So we see a 0.124 with a 50 engagement per 10 in hardpoint prior to Major 5, a 1.2 in search, and a 1.3 in control. But then Scrap got to the event, a 0.96 in hardpoint, 1.11 in S&D is pretty good. And then a 0.9 in control. Like the slaying just wasn't there, bro. All right, so let's take a look at the bracket. I'll give you kind of my final thoughts on Ultra. So they're on the top side. They score up against LA Thieves. This has been a plus matchup for them all season, and I think they're probably favored in this one. My only concern with Toronto, though, is if this thing goes game 5, I don't know if I have them winning that. So I got to really think on my prediction for this one. Well, let's say they win. They're going to score up against FaZe. That's been a bad matchup for them, kind of an opposite of the Thieves thing. I think likely they'll lose there. Now they get them bounced to the bottom side of losers, where they'll play either New York, Rocker, Boston, or Optic. I kind of like whatever the matchup is there. It's probably going to be either like Optic or New York. And then from there, we'll see. I think for me, Toronto has a very good shot to get it to grand finals. They're going to have to be 2 or 3 of these really good teams to get there. It's going to be either FaZe, Thieves, Optic, New York. Like they're going to have to be 2 of those teams, maybe 3 of those teams to get to the finals. I think they can do it, but I'm a little concerned based on the Major 5 performance that this team might be one of the teams that gets third at this tournament and not second or first. All right, let's switch gears and talk about the New York Subliners. Listen, last year was a cluster F. I mean, y'all probably seen the flank episode in the offseason where we played therapists in the New York team. It was ugly. I mean, they won Pro-Am Classic. They got second their own home event, but outside of that, it was really, really ugly. And they had to scramble to qualify for champs, got top 6, team imploded. So what they did is essentially leave. They, Kismet was obviously still on the same deal from last year. They were able to get HYDRA re-signed, although it was a little sketchy with Optic being involved and then that kind of pump fake. And they brought over Caesar Skies from Florida and Preston, aka Priester from Minnesota. And they had instant success this season, winning Major 1, beating Seattle in the finals there. It was like, okay, this team's got a chip on their shoulder. They overhauled the coaching staff, bringing Sender in, Revan going out. Maybe these guys are going to do a lot this season. In the middle of the season wasn't that great to them. I mean, they had the travel issues to Major 2, but they had a home major in the Dallas area where they're based out of, and they had a real stinker in Major 3. They honestly didn't play too bad at the Columbus Major. I mean, that Atlanta Face series is probably going to haunt them. And when Crowder and I have talked about this on Scrap Time, he thinks that New York should have won that series, and then you never know if they had gotten to losers finals. But top 4, not too bad for New York. And then they make a great run in the losers bracket in Major 5. They get hot. They beat a lot of really solid teams, and they go the distance with the Atlanta Face. Surprisingly taking 3 S&Ds in that series, losing most of the respawns, and grabbing the first and last majors of the season as victories. Only team that has won twice this season, and we got to tip that. I don't think anyone would have predicted New York as that squad. They made a lot of decent prize money, and they are your 3rd seed going into this event. Again, as we get towards these contenders, you're going to start to see these stats for these teams are really good, and New York is no exception. I think S&D was maybe like one sort of weak spot for them in the middle of the season, but they've really kind of turn it around here down the stretch. I mean, they've been a good hardpoint team all season. I mean, Fortress hardpoint is maybe the only map that they're a little bit iffy on, but it's hard to square up with these guys on a bunch of the other ones. Talking about S&D, they've been really money at Hotel and Asilo. 10-2 at Asilo is impressive. That being said, the Embassy 4-7, 3-7 Fortress numbers, a little sketchy, although the thing is you can have 2 bad S&D maps, because if you look at kind of how this would play out for New York, you're probably going to get rid of Embassy or Fortress in a series. Their team will get rid of probably like a CeeLo. And, depending on if you take Team A or Team B, you can get a really good S&D map. And then you just got the option to clutch up at the end. And I think New York's gotten better at Embassy. So Fortress probably a map they maybe won't play that much in Search. At Chance, we'll see. The control's been really good, though. And I will say this is like kind of accounting for as well a little bit of regression after Fortress Control came out. They were the best team in that map, and they've looked better at Expo here down the stretch, but Hotel's been really good for them. And they're a solid but not amazing Asilo team. So I think if I'm playing this team, any real opportunity, I think, as far as respawn goes, is really going to be in the control. I think they're good, but not a great control team. But actually, honestly, most of the teams that I think are kind of contenders for this event are good, but not great control teams outside of Toronto. I think to kind of hammer this point home a little bit more, on the left, you have Major 4, and the right, you have sort of the Major 5 stats. Hardpoint has been good for these guys at both events. The S&D was major improved after the last event, and in Major 5, they only dropped 3 S&Ds online and at LAN. 5-0 on Asilo, 4-0 on Mercado. You love to see that. Controls a little bit around the 500, a little bit of a slight regression from the last event where they didn't really play Expo a lot. They played it 4 times this split, and they've basically been 500 on the game mode, which is okay. It's not a danger sign. You want to improve on it. If your S&D is as good as theirs are, like, you feel pretty confident you can still win these series. And you just see like this team, round 11s, 9 wins, 3 losses. That's really good. 8-8 in round 5s and controls, pretty solid. They've had 13 sweeps this season. You look at sort of how they play from map to map in a series. It looks really good. There's not a lot of weaknesses with this New York team, really on paper, if you just look at the surface team stats. Now, I will say they do have some potentially bad matchups. They haven't played great against Toronto this season, 2-4 overall in the season, 1-2 against Optic. They do have a high win record against FaZe, 3-2, but all the series have been really close. I guess you say the same thing for the Optic as well, 4-6 over the 3. Rocker, they've had their number all season by a large margin. 7 maps and 6 is really poor for Rocker. They've not been able to beat these guys. And they've done a really good job, actually. We scroll through here for some of the bottom teams. 4-1 versus Vegas, 4-0 against LAG. 2-3 against Seattle is interesting. Very interesting considering kind of where they may fall in the bracket and what's going on here if Seattle make a run. And 2-1 against Thieves is good, but it looks like those have been pretty close. So some matchups for New York that are a little bit tricky, but overall, the stats are good. If we talk about individual players, I think HYDRA is going to immediately come to mind as a player having a great season. MVP stats are probably going to be the MVP. He's got a 1.2 with 46 engagements per, with 42 seconds to hill in hardpoint this season across 78 maps. 1.27 in S&D with 104 first bloods. That's way up there with some of the leaders. And then a 109 in control. You love to see that. There's not a lot of like weak slayers on this team. I think like, Preston's kind of been up and down, but overall it's kind of ended the season with some really good overall stats. I mean, he's had some rough spots here and there, but things kind of evened out. And I think he's been a plus to that position. Kiz is maybe their weakest slayer, but he's dropping about a 1 in all game modes. So like, I don't think you can really complain on that one, to be honest. And Caesar's doing his thing with an AR. And I think it's been a really good addition to this team. And I guess for him, a big step up from that uncompetitive Florida team he has been on last year. And I think to hammer home the Kiz thing a little bit further, I think we talk about Priesta. They kind of have two X factors, I think, on this team as far as slaying goes. It's Preston and Kiz. Their second sub and their third, second AR players. Both have at times been slow at slaying, but you see like here at Major 5, they both did a really good job overall across all the game modes, really contributing, especially in search. Like both those guys were absolute killer. One thing to watch with this team as we see sort of the first couple of matchups, where is it slaying at with both those guys? Because this guy's going to get his, Hydra's going to get his. At times, Kiz and Priesta have sometimes been a little bit iffy when it comes to the slaying point. All right, so here is New York's bracket, and I think they have a very good draw. So they're going to square up against Rocker. I expect them to win this one. They've had a good chance against these guys all year. They've taken advantage of this matchup. Rocker are going to have a little bit of prep time coming into this, but I just think New York, even if this goes 5s, they're going to grind it out. And then they play Optic, and that's a massive X Factor game because I don't know what version of Optic we're getting at this tournament. They could either win, lose that matchup. I would say right now, I would say they win that matchup, but you never know. So let's say they win, probably playing FaZe Toronto Thieves. I like New York's chances to either win that or lose and then win the elimination finals. Let's say they do lose against Optic and they need to make the losers run. Well, they just did that at the last event. So my kind of assessment in New York is I think the top seeds, I feel like this is a team that's going to be in winners or losers finals. They have a chance to win either. And I feel like right now, if I need to pick another team with Atlanta FaZe, who I think are the other team that I feel like is a lock for the finals considering their history at this event. I think I have New York right now. Optic is probably my next up, but I just don't really know with Optic, and we'll talk about it in this sort of next video. But I like where New York's at the end of the season. They have done what you expect, what you need from good teams, which is when you peak, it's at Champs, and those guys are definitely doing it right now. So yeah, that's it for the video. Both teams, I think, definitely have an opportunity to win. New York maybe more than Toronto, but let's see how they come out this weekend. I think Toronto's got the more difficult round 1 matchup, and then both of them have difficult round 2 matchups, but I think both of them are going to win on their first day, so we will see what happens. Let me know in the comments what you guys think of the video. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe for more, and we'll see you guys on the next one.